Hi, this is Chris Newson. Welcome to the Root Cause Analysis podcast, where we'll take our listeners right to the heart of the important EHS issues. We're coming to you live from Woodland Grange, a conference and hotel venue in the Midlands. In this episode of the Root Cause Analysis podcast, we'll be looking into why health and safety is far more than just understanding the law and appreciating the moral imperative behind keeping people safe. We're now joined on the Root Cause Analysis podcast by Neil Roberts. Neil is one of our learning and development senior consultants in the EHS department at Make UK. Neil has worked for Make UK in this role or similar roles for 29 years. And Neil and I have known each other for about 15 of those years. Welcome to the podcast, Neil.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Yes.
Excellent.
Thank you for inviting me.
No problem at all. I'm genuinely really looking forward to this conversation. It's a fascinating subject. We don't always get a lot of time to sit down and talk about it. So, we have now. So, as I said there, we've known each other for a long time. Mm-hmm. I know you wouldn't agree because you're very modest, but you probably taught me everything I know about behavioural safety in lots of different ways. Those days training at a particular company we won't mention and working all through that. So fantastic. And, that was quite a long time ago. Mm-hmm. And those behavioural safety themes have stuck with me. And it's so important within health and safety, but also just running a good organisation that I thought it'd be useful if you and I talk about that.
Excellent, yes.
Fantastic. So let's start at the beginning, Neil. Tell us a bit about what you do at Make UK.
Principally, I'm involved in the delivery of EHS related courses that may vary from a half-day safety awareness programme through to the CMIOSH programmes, the sort of managing safely, the leading safely, the NEBOSH programmes, and of course culminating in the diploma programmes for occupational health and safety professionals, both nationally and internationally.
Okay. And you particularly specialise in that ND or ID1, health and safety law, risk analysis, etc.
Yes.
So, a lot of people will say law, not that interesting, but it clearly is, isn't it? I mean, I know it's important, but it's again, I've always found that interesting in the way, we explain it in those settings. So you do the training, you do diploma, you do IOSH, NEBOSH, etc.
Yes.
And you do a lot, as you said there, a lot around behavioural safety as well.
Yes.
Now, I'm just interested. So you've been doing that for quite some time, as we've said. How do you think training's changed since 1995 in terms of how we do it? What's important?
Okay. Well, I suppose it's always been about the learning outcomes and meeting those learning outcomes. But I think now really good training, both currently moving towards 2030 and beyond, it is more about the outputs rather than just the legislation sections or numbers that drive it. So in other words, it's less about, say, an employer's duty under Section 7 or Section 2 or an employee's duty under Section 7. It's more about the outputs to those requirements. What are we really looking to do? What are we looking to establish? And ultimately how people behave, not just because they're fearful of something negative if it goes wrong, but more out of what are the benefits of doing it correctly. And if we can develop those into routines and patterns, then that's got to be more influential than just avoiding accidents.
Yeah, that makes sense. And from my experience of delivering some of those programs that you mentioned there, I think we know, don't we, that people, when they do the NEBOSH diploma, for example, they're incredibly worried about that first element because it's all about the law.
Yes. And
you mentioned the Health and Safety at Work Act there, and the thousands of other pieces of legislation. There aren't that many, as we know, but people are really worried about that. But actually, the other elements of Unit 1. You start to talk about behaviour and for me that's far more important to being a good health and safety practitioner than knowing about the law.
Yes. Yeah. And as we say in the tutorials and we discuss it at length, at the end of the day, it's about what people do and far much more than just avoiding something that's negative. And really what we're trying to also encourage is, the consequences of it. And if you just do those simple things, reasonable things. And we're always at pains to say the law is no more than it's reasonable. But reasonableness must be applied, in all senses. So a lot of it is common sense applied in a systematic way.
Yeah.
So what we try and do in the tutorials is, let's say, not forget, of course, the duties and the duty holders, but think, well, in practical terms, in theoretical terms, what would an employer have to provide? What would an employer have to maintain? How do employees have to respond to that? What should they do? What do we have benefits in doing? What should they do less of? What should they absolutely avoid doing? And largely, when we pluck those things out and we explore them, we've arrived at what the employer's duties are under principal legislation and corresponding to what an employee's duties are. So no more reasonable than it's common sense, but common sense must be applied.
I tell you what, that is fascinating, really, because when I did my NEBOSH certificate, that first step in the professional journey, I didn't do it with Mate UK or EEF at the time, as we were. I did it with another organisation that we won't mention. But it wasn't put across like that at all, and it was like you've got to know elements 1 to 5 in the law and be able to recite the Health and Safety at Work Act. And okay, there are questions a bit like that, but if you understand why you've got to know that, it makes it much easier. So I wish someone had explained it to me like that. Probably why I only got 46 out of 46% with the 45% pass mark. But there you go. Never mind. So let's get back to the here and now. So you touched on employee behaviour there, and that being really important. So why is employee behaviour so important within an organisation, do you think?
I suppose in a nutshell, because everybody's involved in it, everybody's involved in some way in its development, in its usage, and ultimately we're all affected by it. So, it's a natural thing. People do things for reasons, but what we're really trying to do is develop and sustain, patterns or routines of behaviour that become automatic and instinctive, even habits. And if we think about, even in society, often if you said something is a habit, people often think, it's something associated with a negative. But they don't always associate it with something that's a positive. So what we try and do within our organisation and develop within organisations is use that methodology, use that understanding of habits, but tailor it to something that's good and supportive and safe and compliant. So because we're all involved in it, we're all affected by it. Another simple example that I often, and it's not always exclusive, but to get to a common denominator, people often might be interested in sport. I am, like many other people. And for me, it happens to be football. And whenever I'm in a football stadium, whether it's my home club or in another stadium, I always look around, and your eyes look upwards to the expanse of the crowd and all the rest of it. And invariably above the stand, there's a name of the stand, and that might be the sponsor's name, and the sponsors, because obviously they've invested heavily in the club, etc., etc., etc. The stand becomes synonymous with that name. But that name, that sponsor, may well be replaced in the fullness of time with actually the name of somebody who was synonymous with that club. So getting it back to your question, it's people that actually make things, and it's people that other people follow. So if you can attach something that's, somebody who is synonymous with a football club, then they can attach themselves to it, and they're all affected by that. So it's a sense of that we are this, instead of it's us and them. And you often see that now in sporting contexts or in football stadiums, we are so-and-so, or the team of us, rather than you and me.
Yeah, and again, that rings true, doesn't it? Because in my experience, most companies have got rules and procedures, and in a lot of examples, people don't follow them. I know I've got to wear the PPE or walk in the gangway, but I don't do it. Well, they don't do it because it's a written rule. They do it because there's good leadership, and it's explained to them why they should, and also, they're following examples that are put there.
Absolutely.
Like you said, it's people. It's not like the written procedure or whatever it might be. You need to get the requirement across in the first place, but then it's all about people, isn't it? Both the leaders and everyone else within the organisation. So all of that leads us to that the leadership bit is something to do with culture, and an organisation that heads in the right direction. Everyone's working towards the same goal, and we're talking about safety here. But to me, it's wider than that. It doesn't matter whether it's safety or not. It's just how an organisation is. And I would imagine, well, I know for a fact, when you work for a company, if there's a good culture with good leadership, you want to stay there. You feel looked after. So it helps. And I think companies don't always see the value in this, but it helps them attract and retain good talent, good people.
Absolutely.
We were talking off camera before about, and we won't say the name of the company, but where you live, there's a company, a very big company, where you were saying people don't leave, they join the company.
Generally they don't.
And that's something to do with the culture.
Very much so, yeah. So there's no ambiguity about it. The organisation sets out its method, its mission, and says, we want to be the world's best, and nothing less is good enough. And so it's not a demand, but it's very much the culture that, well, it has to be the best, and it just is the best in their opinion. And everybody taps into that logic and that ethos, and that spreads over into other areas of their business performance and safety performance, and ultimately how people behave. At the end of the day, it is about people. We all want to be happy. We all want to be content. Nobody goes to work to be injured or made unwell. We all want the best for our family. We all want the best for our friends. So we're not talking about anything that's, superficial or indeed the statement like rocket science. It's just people do things generally for reasons. Yeah. And, we've got to understand what those reasons are. And tailor our activities, our systems and procedures to bring out the best, and to try and make sure that best is repeated. Long after someone is carrying an audit sheet or someone's looking, it just remains there. It's that shadow we cast, that's around leadership. I mean, we've done it in training courses before, very subjectively, where, let's say at the first break, let's say in the morning, I've descended down a set of stairs and I've deliberately been the first down the stairs, and I've just deliberately held the handrail, going down the stairs, not as if my life depended upon it, but just because I think that's the right thing to do. So I'm shadowing, sort of got loosely on the handrail. And as I get to the bottom, I just swiftly look round, and I'm making a mental note of how much compliance there is, and there might be sort of 40 or 50%. But then I do that throughout the first day, maybe 3 times or 4 times. And by the end of the day, I notice that the compliance is a lot higher. So we have that discussion with the group. And I say to them, do you remember how many of you held the handrail when you came down the stairs at first? And hardly anybody remembers. And yet at the end of the day, he said, oh, yes, I can remember holding the handrail. So why was that? Yeah. And nobody really knows. I said, because I did it first. And I just did it resiliently and repetitively until it just became a behavioural norm. So it shows that you can actually do these things, sustain these things without actually having anything written down or telling someone to do it. You just behave in the right way.
That makes sense when you explain it like that, but it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, in that classroom, you are the teacher. So you are naturally, I'm sure, hopefully by most of the group, you're naturally seen as the sort of almost senior figure in the room, if you like. And so you're exhibiting this certain behaviour, and it's just followed over time. And like you said, people don't know why they're doing it, but it's subconscious. And we can translate that into the workplace, can't we?
Absolutely.
Someone's a senior executive in a leadership role, and it might not be by title. They might just be, a union representative or something. So they're that implied leader, and people follow that behaviour. I suppose the other side of that is that if those people in those roles don't do the right thing, that creates a problem.
I mean, anybody can be, or good leaders come from anywhere within the organisation. It's just far more important and indeed detrimental if people who are in a leadership role don't do it when perhaps they should. And it's even more detrimental if they don't do it and people see them not doing it. So correspondingly, if we understand what's going on there, and we do, and we can explain why through antecedents or activators and consequences for behaviour, if then correspondingly a leader does something safe and compliant, positive, supportive, then other people will follow that. But it's very powerful, but very subjective. And it's just the reason why people hold doors open for each other in busy thoroughfares, or expect to wave when you've been let out of a junction.
Yeah.
It's just the way people behave, but importantly, what people expect as an output to that behaviour.
Absolutely. I mean, I love to talk about this stuff. It's interesting, isn't it? So you're driving to work. This didn't really happen to me. I'm not saying it did, but let's say I was driving to work this morning. And I get to a junction, and I'll let someone out because I'm a nice guy, and usually 9 times out of 10 they'll wave, flash the lights, thanks very much, etc. And I'll do it next time, and so on. And then there's that one time, isn't there? And there could be a host of reasons. They're in a rush, whatever. I'll let someone out, and they're not horrible, but they don't say thank you. They don't put that. And I say to myself, I won't do that again. And I get to the next junction, I don't let anyone out. And hopefully the norm behaviour returns at some point. But that, and then the person in the other car that I'm letting out isn't a leader as such, but they've got influence on me because I'm expecting them to do something. So yeah, it's interesting. Clearly, it's interesting stuff. Human behaviour. So you said there in our conversation that, and I might be paraphrasing what you said, but no one really goes to work to hurt themselves. People have a natural instinct to try and remain safe, right? So here's a difficult question for you. Why do, and we talked a bit about it there, but why do employees, why do people break rules? Why do they do that?
Well, very rarely is the one single reason. Usually it's a multitude of reasons, or many reasons, based, I suppose, on three main areas.
Okay.
That might be organisational reasons. There might be reasons that pertain to the job, or individual reasons for it. It may well be that doing it the safe way is very difficult. Doing it the safe way is negative for them. They see other people doing it incorrectly and seem to get favourable outcomes when they do.
Yeah.
They might see people not doing it in the way in which we would hope they do, and they get positive outputs if they don't. So it's that difference between what's driving the behaviour and ultimately what the consequences are for it. So, it might just be that they're a risk taker. It might be because the complexities of the job are beyond their capabilities to perform it naturally. It might be because there's a lack of leadership, a lack of resource, a lack of training. It could be for many reasons. No one single reason often, but I think it's vitally important that what we have to do is understand why people are doing it. And if I can just make reference back to your example about, you'd let someone out of a side road, and you're expecting the wave or the nod as the consequence to your supportive behaviour. And then correspondingly, let's say on an occasion you don't get that. What you'll often find someone then doing is prompting them for the response. So you'll often hear people go, thank you, because they're expecting it.
Yeah.
But equally, when you understand, and we do, how this works, instead of, and I'm not criticising or challenging what you're saying because it's absolutely right, but in the sense of, well, I might not let those out in future. Well, that's an automatic and understandable response to the behaviour that you've seen.
Yeah.
So it's a consequence. Well, I'm not going to do that anymore then.
Yeah.
So if I do a good, safe job and I don't get any sort of seemingly benefit out of doing it, I might question my motives for doing it in the future. But if we're defaulting positively as an organisation and as individuals, when that person doesn't let you out of that road, or they don't wave to you having been let out by yourself, the default positive would say there must be a reason why they haven't done that. Yeah. Not just because they can't be bothered or they don't like me. That might be the case, but I doubt if it would. But there will be a reason for it. Now, it might just be because they're concentrating on something else. Yeah. So if we think about why people might break the rule, they might be thinking, well, there's an organisational benefit in breaking the rule, or there might be a personal benefit in breaking the rule. In other words, we're to follow the rules, but if I follow the rules, I'm going to miss my children's bedtime. Yeah, yeah. So I might be tempted to go faster to get there. Or it might be a routine type breaking of the rule because everybody does it. And it seemed to be just the behavioural norms. Or then going outside of that accepted behaviour is very much in isolation, and you have to be quite brave to go outside the group norms, if you think about it. So if everybody's compliant and nobody moans about the fact that the procedure is complicated, moaning not the right word, nobody complains about the procedure being complicated, or there isn't enough time, or the organisation doesn't train sufficiently, it's very easy to just do nothing about that. But in a really good organisation, really good cultures, and indeed resilient people will constantly make that point about there is an issue here. They won't do it inappropriately, but they'll just keep repeatedly doing it because they know it's the right thing to do, even if nobody else is doing it and they're getting little response out of it. And that's where those leadership behaviours are from wherever they are in the organisation.
You can see it, and that makes complete sense in the context of, me letting someone out of the road and those sort of examples. But you can see it in organisations, can't you? You know, for example, all supervisors, well, I don't know if all supervisors, but in a good company with a good safety culture, supervisors are told these rules are really important and you've got to enforce them, but do it in the right way, say something. But it's consistency, isn't it? It's doing it all the time. That one time that you don't follow through on the rule or you accept someone not wearing the PPE is just an easy throwaway example. It just undoes all the previous work, doesn't it? Because that's the last thing that people remember. So it's hard. It's hard. No one's saying it's easy, but you've got to be consistent.
Just absolutely consistent to the point of, refusing to give in. So if you think about it as a single behaviour, if you think about it as a group behaviour, if you think about it as an organisational behaviour, the easiest thing in the world to do when it's not going your way is to stop doing it. Because it gives you an output that I don't have to do that anymore. But in a really resilient company or in a really proactive organisation, or indeed individual behaviours, they just refuse to give in. They'll just keep making that point. They'll do it in an appropriate way, in a reasonable way, but they'll keep making that point. And they'll understand some of the challenges. And generally people, if they know and understand what the issues are through communication, they might not agree. They might chunt to themselves about, well, we haven't got the right PPE or we don't have the time. But as long as it's explained to them the reasons why, people generally will understand that and they'll go along with it. It's when the messages are unclear or there are mixed messages. We want you to be safe, but get the job done.
Might have heard that before.
Somewhere. Or it's one rule for one and one rule for another group of people. And that division, if we were to ally that to a sporting context, and it's really, really negative, if anyone in the organisation sees this, but if they see a senior person doing something that is at odds with the culture, safe, compliant, positive, and all the rest of it, let's say a company's got a reverse parking policy, or you have marked bays for disabled drivers, and then because it's absolutely throwing down with rain, a very senior person, and we understand why, we're not being critical, may park their car immediately in one of those spaces. But if someone sees that, it sends a very, very clear, powerful message that actually what we say and what we do doesn't match up. And people aren't silly. People aren't daft. They'll think, well, if they're doing that and we're seeing that, what things are they doing we don't see it? How that might affect us.
It just the whole thing becomes disingenuous, isn't it? It's just a rule. It doesn't really matter.
It doesn't.
And honestly, I would be a bit stronger there. I would be critical of leaders that do that because, that's part of the role. Lead by example, do the right thing. And, I think that the days of thinking you can have that privilege of parking in the bay that's closest to the door because it's raining, hopefully are becoming less. But people have got to realise that doing that undermines all of the positive culture you're trying to bring in. And they might say, well, it's nothing to do with safety and so on. But it isn't. It's to do with behaviour. And
Exactly.
If it's organisational behaviour, it's not just safety. It's relevant to everything, isn't it? Quality, whatever else you want to say.
And when people are really trying to make that point, and we do this out of leadership programmes, it's just the very simple things. It's often the quite subjective things, but they're often quite powerful things as well. So with the parking example, when a leader knows and understands this, they might deliberately park somewhere that might be, 30 seconds walk away. It says 20 spaces away from the one that's available.
Yeah.
Somebody might see them. Somebody might even be brave enough, if that be the right term, to say, well, boss, why are you parking there? He said, well, because I want to leave the other spaces for people who are a bit more needy and maybe a bit more time than I do. I don't need to. That's sending that very powerful, subjective, subliminal message that I'll do it the right way, but then correspondingly that has a very powerful effect on other people.
Yeah.
And you'll see other people doing it.
Absolutely, and it's so. I think that's so easy, isn't it? If you appreciate your influence as a leader, if you don't appreciate that or you don't care about that, and you think your job as a leader is just to issue these instructions and hope that people follow them, I think you'll fail, or you'll just take a lot more effort to get what you want. Whereas if you're, the sort of, as a great example, the sort of leader that puts other people first and leads by example, the right example, then, that's far more effective than forms and, campaigns and so on. That's just the way it is. It's the natural, how the world, certainly the Western world works, leadership actions come throughout the organisation.
People follow people and generally they like to follow people who they see as being, standard bearers, people who they look up to, who they respect, who they admire, who they actually like, and you can see that through all manners of, you can roundly disagree with someone. That's fine. It's great to have a disagreement, as long as it's respectful and as long as there is reasonable debate.
I mean, you don't need to be, neither of us are, but you don't need to be a behavioural psychologist in order to understand this stuff. I mean, it's pretty straightforward and pretty obvious. And it just perhaps gets lost in the heat of battle in a workplace.
I think leaders just need help understanding it.
Yeah. I think that's fair. Yeah. So to summarise, all the stuff we've said there, which is an unfair thing to do, but people don't misbehave and not follow safety rules, just because they're bad people, right? No. You talked about job, organisational, individual factors there that make people behave in a certain way. And I think if people stop for a second and think about that, they can understand that, whatever context, letting someone out on a road or following the right gangway in a workplace. So, people don't want to hurt themselves. Let's boil that down. So what can organisations do to improve that and help people understand that and instill this sort of positive safety culture?
Okay, so I suppose from the start they can make the objectives clear.
Okay.
They can be very consistent in their approach to things. So we do that always. We on occasion or when necessary we do that. We rarely do that. We never do that.
Okay.
So it's having that clarity around what we're trying to do through aims and objectives. That's one thing, setting the right sort of culture by leadership behaviours. Understanding why people might make mistakes, lapses of attention, human error, and so on. People make errors, people make mistakes every day. It's often we only really identify with it when something bad or overtly good has happened. So if you just knock something over and there isn't any negative consequence, you often sort of forget that. But if you knock something over and it gets damaged or it gets broken, you remember it. But people do this quite a few times every day. So understanding that to get things wrong, to make errors is perfectly normal. But what the organisation strives to do is to reduce the amount of errors, reduce the lapses of attention. So, having an organisational structure that supports the safe, the compliant, the good, making sure its systems and procedures are user-friendly, not over-complex, making sure people have got time to do it, they're trained how to do it, and they understand the value of doing it, and equally they understand the consequences if they don't do it. And clearly the consequences around someone making a mistake and maybe someone deliberately violating a rule, need to be different. And that's where we touch upon things like the just culture, which is understandable. But trying to minimise human error, maximise performance and wholeheartedly deter, risk-taking, violating rules for whatever reason, is a strategy. But as long as we've got an organisational strategy and then we've got the right systems, procedures, organisational competence and awareness to deliver it, and then systematically we can start to reduce the risk-taking things, get things to be more compliant, and then even develop routines and patterns of behaviour to instil these habits. And that's the really powerful thing we believe from that, is if you can make something a habit, people just do it, irrespective of external forces driving upon them or influencing them.
And I mean, that's not complicated. I mean, if you took a real manufacturing-centric example here, you know, someone's operating a machine, and let's say it's an old machine, so you've got to slide the guard across, you've got to press a button, you've got to, you know, stand in a certain place. Just that repeated. It'll be written down somewhere, great, but no one's going to read that after the first sort of 2 times.
No.
That repeating that habit, as you said, and that just becomes the way to do it. But as you said earlier as well, it's dangerous, isn't it? Because if you get that wrong, you know, if you have the wrong habit and that just gets reinforced all the time, that becomes that's the new habit, right? You know, they're not habits, as you said, are not always positive. So, you know, procedures, and I've said in a previous question, you know, procedures are not that important. Well, yeah, you've got to have them to start with, right? Because that's the expected behaviour.
Yeah.
So that's the organisational bit, and then it's the making sure that keeps working, influencing people to follow the rules, but for the right reason, you know, all of those sort of things.
Exactly.
And it's just, and you said as well, you know, and I think it's really important to think about it, or helpful to think about it in that job, individual, organisational way. We've talked a lot about organisation and culture. We've talked about individuals in that people are different, and you've got to appreciate that they might be having a tough day, or you know, again, paraphrasing what you said. You know, there's also the really easy things about the job, isn't there? You know, I someone once said to me, it might have been you, I don't know. You know, if you make the easiest way to do something also the safest way, right? You know, you're taking away this list of excuses that people have got. So even job design or task design helps you generate the right behaviours.
Yeah, very much so. If it's easy to do it the right way, the compliant way, even if it's nigh on impossible to do it the wrong way, you know, so a guard can only be fitted one way, a switch can only be operated in one position. You know, you can't operate a button or a component incorrectly. You know, that's a fundamental of good design, which reduces human error, which is all great. And we invest in those sorts of things, but not everything can be designed like that. You know, sometimes you have to have people who are actually, you know, involved in things where there isn't an element of, well, you can only do it one way, or it's impossible to do it the wrong way. Well, then what we're trying to do is influence and allow people to do it in the safe way because they value it and there are benefits for doing it, but correspondingly that they're discouraged, or it's a habit not to do it in that way. So you know, people often might say, a leader might say to somebody, you know, are you ever tempted to do it unsafely, or do it as opposed to the rule? And say, well, yeah, often I get tempted. Why don't you do it then? Well, because we just don't do that. It just becomes the behavioural norms. You know, that's that. We never do that.
Yeah, and you realise the consequences of if you did break the rule, not just around safety, but the influence it has on other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And if my colleague, somebody, a co-worker, saw me doing it, I'd want them to challenge me, and correspondingly, I would challenge them. And it's not just about the individual themselves; it's individuals understanding the wider context of what that might mean. In other words, you know, don't necessarily just do it the safe way for yourself, because with respect, that's a little selfish. But what about those people who would be affected by that non-compliance? Children, family, friends, colleagues, you know, etc., etc., etc. They would be disappointed. They might even be negatively affected by those sorts of things. So, you know, so don't follow the rule because I told you to. Don't follow the rule because there's some sort of perceived draconian law that you have to follow, but follow it because you and you alone can identify there's a positive benefit in doing it. And if we do that, correspondingly, it will make a positive or have a positive impact on performance. And a simple example might be, consistently for the last decade or so, there's been sort of like 15 to 1600 fatalities on the roads every year. So 5-6 people a day on average are killed. And if we know, and many people do, the understanding of the accident triangle that relates to serious accidents, less serious accidents, maybe near misses, and then the behaviours at the bottom. Yeah. What society and individuals are often focused on extensively are these outputs. So that it's a serious injury, or it's a life-changing injury, or it's a fatality. And what we should perhaps be doing is focusing more on that behaviour at the bottom. And if we can influence that behaviour away from the unsafe and the non-compliant and more to the safe and compliant, then that will have a positive output in the output at the top. Yeah. And we do this in training courses. So as a parting shot or as a debate towards the end of the course, so okay, let's offer a challenge, but let's make it a challenge that's easy to achieve. And if someone, let's say, just for discussion's sake, said they've got a 20-minute commute on the way home, what I might say to them is, okay, during that 20-minute commute, I don't expect you to be exemplary over that journey, because that's a step too far. But if you can, for 2 minutes of that 20-minute commute, if you can default to the safe, the compliant, the considerate driver, not breaking the rules, adhering to speed limits and the highway code, if you can do that, I won't guarantee that you'll get home any earlier. I can't guarantee that. But I can sort of guarantee that you'll get there, or that journey, that 2 minutes, will be a little less pressured than maybe it is. And also at the same time, it'll give you the opportunity to see other people maybe engaging in behaviours that are at risk for themselves and others. And maybe, just maybe, you can understand why they're tempted to do it.
Yeah. As we said, you don't need to be a behavioural psychologist. It's these behaviours we see all around us. It's just normal human stuff, Yes. So, coming towards the end of our time here, and building on what you just said there, what if you could give, and we talked about senior leaders quite a lot. Okay, if you could give senior leaders one piece of advice that they can take away. Well, I'm sure there's loads, but
just one.
Sorry, I'm putting a bit of pressure.
No.
What's the one thing that they could take away to drive this positive?
It is good. Obviously, a great question, and obviously, I could give some really profound answer at length.
I'm sure, yeah.
But that wouldn't really be powerful because it's not memorable. People would forget it. Okay. So what we try and do, of course, is make things simple, easy, understandable. Hence, that's why we have strap lines or memorable statements. You have to be in it to win it. Clunk click every trip, keep bit and tidy, enjoy alcohol responsibly, all these other strap lines to make them memorable, to make them powerful to people. But and this is often a question, or I'm asked, would you make a comment? And I think for me, there are many, and I tend to interchange them. But the one that I favour mostly at the moment is what we like to call the 3 C's of leadership.
Okay.
And it's interesting, isn't it, how things often come in threes.
Yeah.
Pilots, passengers and pirates, winners, watchers and whingers, whatever. But it's true.
Yeah.
So the 3 C's of leadership, a clarity of expectation, like we were alluding to earlier on. We do that, we may do that, we never do that. So it's clear, right. It's unambiguous. A consistency of approach, which is obviously very, very important. And then consequences for behaviour. And we're not talking about 3 strikes and you're out. We're not talking about high fives and hugs, bear hugs. We're just talking about when people do it well, let's have a consequence that supports that doing it well. And it need be no more than the raising of the hand when letting someone out of a side street, or recognising when it's easy for someone not to wear their PPE because it's hot, it's uncomfortable, but they are doing it contrary to what their instinct might be telling them. They're actually complying. Occasionally, a little bit of recognition for that effort is very, very powerful. So, clarity of expectation, a consistency of approach across the piece, being absolutely determined and resilient to it, and consequences for behaviour, supporting the good, challenging the bad. And if we can make those habitual as well, so if I do it wrong, I won't do it wrong just because I've done it deliberately wrong, but I might make a mistake, a lapse of attention, so on and so forth, human error. But my colleague, my co-worker sees that. I would hope that they challenge me, because it just has that more profound effect. And if we do that effectively and consistently, then we can start to routine incentivise appropriately and habitualise behaviours. And we can do that one behaviour at a time, you know, and that's what really smart organisations do. They pick one behaviour, you know, often within the scope of an employee's, you know, jurisdiction, let's say. What behaviour do we want to get better at? And then start measuring it, understand the reasons why it might not be compliant, maybe changing those reasons and adapting the consequences. So I know I've been rambling on, but a clarity of expectation, a consistency of approach and consequences for behaviour.
Neil, I wouldn't call it rambling. I mean, you know, I said at the beginning how long we've known each other and talking about behavioural safety. I mean, I know you said you interchanged what the answer is there, but I don't think I've ever heard you talk about those. I'm sure you have, but not to me. Those three C's, and to me, there might be three things. Okay, fine, but it's pretty straightforward, easy stuff for senior leaders and anyone else really to take away and do something about. So, you answered the question.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Really enjoyed that, Neil. Thanks very much.
Always a pleasure.
Nice. Cheers.
Thank you.
Fantastic conversation with Neil Roberts today around safety culture and in particular leadership. And I think the one thing it's shown me is that leaders can come from anywhere in an organisation. It doesn't matter what level you're at. In terms of being a leader in safety, it's about doing the right thing and people seeing you doing the right thing. This is the part of the show where we talk to one of our consultants who's going through the IPD process to become a chartered member of EHS. Hopefully it will help to demystify that process for you. Hi Leila, how are you doing?
Good morning, Chris. I'm okay. Are you okay?
Yes, I'm good. Yes, yeah, very good. Yes, lovely morning here at Woodland Grange. So that's
lovely.
Very nice. Yeah, perfect. So, thanks once again. Thanks for joining us on the podcast. This is the bit just to remind everyone where we look at how particularly your journey through to chartered membership is going. So I'm sure that's very nice for you. But just to give our members an insight into that journey, because as we've talked about before, things are changing and the process is new, whichever process you're in. Yeah. So your insights into that. So let's start with, if you don't mind, where you're up to, progress you've made since last time we spoke, etc.
Sure. So just to clarify or confirm, from last time, I am on the older version of the new route. So this isn't the new route. This is coming out any second now. I'm on the older, newer version. Just so not to confuse people.
That's clear. Yeah.
That's very clear. Yeah. Where am I? No. It's on the horizon. I can see it coming. The assessment lands with me not next week, the week after.
Okay.
And I am obviously incredibly excited, I've confused terrified with that. There we go. I'm sure it's going to be fine.
Yes.
So I think I've got the actual assessment opens on the Wednesday. And I've got, I know we spoke about this last time, but the lovely Make UK have said you need to take time to do this because it's, part of your development. Yeah. So I've got the Friday to focus completely on part A, which is the 48 multiple choice questions that you have to do in 3 hours. Oh, gosh. And then hopefully, pretty much there and then if you are successful or not. And then providing I'm successful, I've then got the following Thursday, Friday to just head down and go on with then the open book questions, if you like, to which I understand there'll be 2 of them. So to help prepare myself for that, because apparently it's all going to be on the syllabus that IOSH have specifically for the assessment and specifically for chartership. So I'm going through the syllabus. I'm just making sure that I'm familiar with the 11 parts of it, what they mean to me, what they mean to IOSH, maybe what kind of cheeky questions could go in there or not. So that's just how I'm preparing at the moment.
Okay, all right. Sounds like fun, if that's the right word. Probably not.
Terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's just go a bit more into that, because that's really interesting. So before, on our last call, on the last episode, we talked about the 9-step process, and you explained that brilliantly. And so everyone understands that, I'm sure. This is the part then when you're doing the open assessment part A.
Yes.
So you just said there 48 questions.
Yes.
And I know you already told us this last time, but how does it work? That it's online and you get a certain amount of time to do it?
Yes, exactly that.
Okay.
It's within the IPD portal itself. I understand it will be released in there because that's where they've got that little dummy test that you can go in and have a go with. And it's literally the question with 4 possible answers, radio buttons, and you press the button that you think is the right answer. Now, although that sounds quite simple and straightforward, obviously multiple choice question, don't we just love a good assessment like that? But we know it's not going to be a, what's your name? Is it A, B or C sort of thing? These are going to be quite detailed. Probably because it is structured around the syllabus that IOSH have, that they want to be, having chartered membership, having a full awareness of this syllabus.
Okay, it makes sense. Yeah, and again, just to be crystal clear and step through this to help everyone, we're not talking here about the 12 key competencies from IOSH's competency framework. This is 11 things that make up the syllabus that they think you should know, basically.
Indeed. In fact, I thought it just says, and the open book, open examination syllabus summary I'm actually looking at the moment. So it's specifically for the assessment. Okay,
cool. So in that case, if you don't mind, would you be able to just sort of take us through the 11 things of the syllabus, just headlines and your view on them, if that's okay?
There's a lot of detail. I think we need about 4 podcasts for all the details.
We'll skim over that.
Okay, so the summary version. The first one we have, element 1, is all about promoting a positive health and safety culture. And there are 6 areas of knowledge in there, such as roles and responsibilities, internal and external influences, that sort of thing. So in my mind, to prepare for this, I'm already thinking about, well, what is good health and safety culture to me? What does that look like? How does it work? So I'm thinking, well, leadership, worker engagement, how they work together are essential pillars, if you like, of if we don't have one on one side, then the other side's going to fail. And then I'm then going down the route of, well, okay, let's think about then another thing is reviewing health and safety culture. So what does that look like for leaders? How would they want to be doing that? What does that look like for employees? What would they want to see from their leaders, and so on and so forth? So that's the kind of brainstorming that I'm doing with that element as an example. I won't go into that much detail for all of them, by the way. It's just to give people a bit of an understanding of how my thoughts are going. Element 2, develop and implement health and safety management systems. Love a good management system. So again, of course, Plan, Do, Check, Act. 45,001. What does that look like? Again, with leadership and worker engagement at the heart of it all that sort of good stuff. You can see where my mind is going, because it's all about leaders.
I feel like you won't have to do much prep. Certainly on the second one.
That's only the first 2. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Element 3, human factors in health and safety. So that, to me, actually is one of my really keen bean areas that I really want to get to know more on anyway. So I'm quite excited to look into that sort of thing. And that's all about factors affecting people's behaviour, what their perceptions are of risk, how risk averse or risk tolerant they are, why did they do it at that moment in time because it was the right thing to do in their mind, all that sort of good stuff. Element 4, develop and implement active/proactive monitoring systems for health and safety. Lovely. And for those of us out there that have done or are in industry or have done health and safety roles in the industry, this is your bread and butter, I think. So agreed. I'm not actually too worried about that one. I think I'll be all right with that. Then you've got your element 5, develop and implement reactive monitoring systems for health and safety. So thinking about techniques, thinking about accident and incident causation, what's happened, what does that investigation look like, how do we go about improving that going forward, so on and so forth.
Okay, yeah, fine, yeah.
So you can already see that IOSH, I feel, are quite keen on the whole people, leadership, managing it properly, safely, the right way. And it's the right thing to have, because that's the point of chartership, isn't it? Leading the way forward.
Yeah, there's a definite focus on, as you say, leadership and culture, and yeah, it is important in being a chartered member, but you know, it is, as we know, it's important in being a good safety practitioner, isn't it? You know,
Exactly.
We know a lot more about why safety initiatives and systems fail and succeed, and it's a lot to do with a lot to do with culture, behaviour. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it makes sense.
Absolutely. Okay. And I think a bit of advice to anyone that is doing the syllabus route, the open assessment route, is that have in the back of your mind the whole time, what does good health and safety look like? What does good culture look like? What does good management systems look like? Because you will have seen them somewhere, maybe not everywhere.
Yeah.
Now, I'm incredibly lucky that I get to see a number of different members. I get to see a number of different sites, and of course worked in industry for so long that you can quite quickly go, now I know where good is, what good looks like, and maybe now I know what potentially shouldn't be the right thing to be doing. So I'm quite fortunate that I have opportunity for that, and it's helping me with my understanding of the syllabus. Definitely. So definitely, people out there, have that thought in mind.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it sounds like, I don't know if you see it like this being in it, but it sounds like, you know, it's a great assessment of our people at the right point to go on to the next level, but also it's a good, you know, CPD opportunity, because it gets you to look further into certain things. I mean, all the things you've said so far, I think we both know, you know, quite a lot about, but there might be other stuff that might be other stuff that you need to go into further. So yeah, it's all that sort of IOSH, CPD, good stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
So we I think we got up to element 6, and so that's all about development and implement of health and safety emergency response systems and procedures. So again, bread and butter for guys who are in industry. 7, develop and implement health and safety review and audit systems. Love a good audit, so I'm quite happy with that one, as I'm sure we are. I'm sure most of us would be. Number 8 is to contribute to health and safety legal actions. So that's one I'm probably going to focus more on, even though I have quite a solid legal base understanding. Law changes, things change, so that's potentially going to be the one that I'm going to spend the majority of my prep time over the next few days, just having a look through to make sure I understand what it is that IOSH are looking for when it comes to that section. That's the question, isn't it? You know, we know about if we're at this level, we know about the law and how it works, but what questions are they going to ask? Exactly. Yes. If it's what was the latest piece of legislation, it'd be like, oh, hold on, which one are we talking about? So let's have a think.
Hopefully it won't be that.
Element 9, identify and evaluate health and safety hazards. Very comfortable with that one. It talks about work equipment, it talks about chemicals, it talks about radiation, noise, but also the psychosocial side of things as well. So coming back to our human beings, coming back to our human factors and culture again. So that's lovely. Element 10, assessing health and safety risks themselves. Yep. So there's only 4 points, 4 categories in that. I say only 4, but it's literally just thinking about the risks to the people's health. So thinking about occupational health, medical surveillance, that sort of good stuff in there. And then element 11, our last element, we've got determine and implement health and safety risk control measures. So again, bread and butter to us who've been in industry, all about how are we now actually going to keep our people safe now that we've realised how we're going to harm them. So I love the way, I mean, we wouldn't expect anything less, but I love the way it all just fits together beautifully. And so they've done well, IOSH. They've done well.
Well done, IOSH. It sounds good. And there is a lot of positive noise about this, the way things are now. So that's good.
Good.
And you talked there about I think these being these are the shorter questions, and then there's 2 part B is 2 longer questions.
Yes,
Is that right?
so they're sort of
Okay.
essay format, I understand.
Okay.
So it's and until they are released, I won't obviously know the full details.
Sure. Yeah.
But I believe it's 2 questions with something like they have a 700 word count limit,
Okay.
or previous ones have. So they might tweak it a little bit on this one, and that's all about, for those who've done perhaps the open book NEBOSH GC or NEBOSH diploma, I expect it to be quite similar to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds. I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just zeroing in on part A, these number of questions, 48 questions. Yeah. No, sorry to bring that up again. Now, is there a time limit around that? I mean, it sounds to me like they're quite.
Yes.
You're not expected to go and research. You just should get through them relatively quickly. Or have I got that wrong?
So what I understand
Yeah.
is almost right. How's that? We'll take
Okay,
the positive. Almost
I'll
right.
take that.
But what I understand is you need to have the understanding of the syllabus and understanding of the areas themselves. But then the actual assessment is, I believe it's these 48 questions over a 3-hour period, or you have 3 hours to do it in. Whether you do it in 30 minutes or 2 hours 59, that's up to you. But IOSH have made it quite clear that you're not going to be able to just go into this without doing some sort of preparation work around the syllabus, around the information that's fundamental to chartership. So they have made that quite clear. So I don't think I could just rock up when it opens and go, I'm going to blitz this out the park in 30 minutes. I don't think it's that kind of opportunity. I think it's a little bit more detailed than that.
Yes, doesn't sound like the way you roll anyway. You know,
no.
Okay.
Do like the detail,
Yeah, perfect. So we've talked about part A, and you've explained the 48 questions. Just again, remind us of your date, if you don't mind. When will you be doing them?
So the actual release is the Wednesday, I think it's the 14th of. Let me just double check that, because of course this is going out Wednesday. The Wednesday, the 14th of August. That's when it's released. So I have Friday the 16th to do my Let's Get Part A done and out the way. And you know pretty much there and then if you have passed or failed, because obviously if you failed, you don't go on to Part B. It just doesn't happen. Okay. So I'm keeping everything crossed. Come on.
Yeah. Well,
and then
I'm quite sure you'll be fine. Yeah.
No pressure. And then Part B, the actual closure date is I think it's the Monday the 26th. But I'm actually on annual leave that week, and that's a bank holiday. So I have to make sure it's done and dusted on Friday the 23rd. So I have the 22nd and the 23rd of head down, get into the old NEBOSH diploma routine of just get on with it, get your research going, get this, get that, and so on and so forth.
Exciting.
So, nerve-wracking. A little bit nerve-wracking.
Well, I mean, it's as we've sort of said or alluded to. I mean, it sounds like there's clearly a lot to do. They can ask you any questions. You don't know what the sort of exact how it's going to work until you go through it, and that's why this conversation is so valuable to our members. But at the end of the day, you know, you clearly know the stuff. So it's, you know, the things you've read out and gone through there, you know, we know that you know the answers to those questions.
Hopefully,
but it's good, isn't it? Because, in my opinion, because it makes sure that people do know that stuff to get to the next stage, because you've gone through the NEBOSH diploma route. There are many other different routes that people might go through, and this is a nice sort of just check that everyone's got the right information and right knowledge before they go on. So
exactly. Then you need to be on that right level to become a chartered member. And you know, we wouldn't want chartership to be easy. You want to work for it because you want to earn it. So you know,
exactly.
Because
it
is what it is.
If it doesn't mean anything if it's easy, you know.
Exactly.
I would
Exactly.
Okay. So I know that our next podcast is early October. The next episode, the next time we're going to speak about this, I'm sure we'll speak in between, is early October. So at that point, you'll be able to tell us how it's gone,
Yep.
You'll be able to tell us how many points you passed by and
Oh,
those
no.
sort of. Those sort of
I'm
things.
not sure I'm going to share that one.
No. Okay.
We'll
yeah,
see.
just pass will be fine. Yeah. So that again, that'll be incredibly useful because you've actually been through that process, and I think it's certainly when I was going through it, it's very difficult to. You can read all the things you like about what the process is like, but it's really good to talk to someone that's going through it. So I think that, again, our members will find that useful and anyone else that listens.
Hopefully.
Okay. All right. That sounds absolutely perfect. And once again, thank you. I think I've asked all the questions I wanted to. And
Wonderful.
most importantly, it's been really useful. So thank you, Leila, and see you on the next podcast.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Chris.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining us. Hope you've enjoyed today's show. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss out on future episodes, and I'll see you on the next one.